Hello and welcome to the podcast of Tech EU. I am your host, Andriy Degeler. In our today's episode, I would like to play back for you an interview with Giovanni Seppia from the European Registry for Internet Domains, or EURID. We have talked about how many .eu domains there are, the effect of Brexit, the importance of having a block-wide domain zone like .eu, and so much more. So let's check out this one together. If we can start with you introducing yourself and telling in a few words what is it that you're doing.
Yeah. So my name is Giovanni Seppia. I'm the External Relations Manager of EURID. EURID is the registry operator of .eu, top-level domain, and its variants in other scripts. And I'm dealing with quite a broad spectrum of matters, from international relations to marketing and communication to our environmental sustainability and so on at EURID.
Right. And how about yourself? What did you do before you got to EURID, and what actually made you turn to this sort of European internet industry?
So I graduated in international law several years ago, and I was in charge of European Union policies and programs at the region of Tuscany in an office of the region of Tuscany. And I did have little idea of what internet was about. I mean, I was an internet user. I was not managing anything of the internet. And then suddenly I found myself at a conference where I was presenting something that belonged to a colleague of mine who couldn't make it. And then there was somebody in the audience, and she invited me to join the .it registry. And then as, let's say, person in charge of international relations at the .it registry, the Italian registry for .it. And then I said yes. And then since then, which was the end of 1999, I was sort of stuck in the industry with pleasure, because it's a great experience so far. And it's also, it allows you to know things that most of the people, they ignore, or at least they believe that internet runs by itself, but it's not, because there are quite many people that are making the internet running properly all around the world.
Right. So a bit later, we will get into the differences that you could have seen between national and European TOD manager. But before that, can you tell me a bit more about the actual EU zone? And first of all, what is the role of it? Like, why do we even need this domain name? Why are national ones not enough?
So the .eu top-level domain was born a bit later than most of the country codes, the so-called country codes. It is classified as a country code. So .com, for instance, is classified as a generic top-level domain. We are classified as a country code because we are somehow linked to a specific region. And therefore, we belong to the country code, let's say, environment. It was a project of the European Council, Parliament, and the Commission, which dates back in 1999, when the European Commission launched the e-Europe program to digitalize the European Union. And the, let's say, launch of its own top-level domain was one of the objectives of this European Commission program. And .eu became a reality in 2006 when went public for launch, so anybody could start registering domain names under .eu. Since then, it was a European project that required quite some time, with a lot of regulations and steps at the Parliament and Council level. Why .eu? Because I believe there was a need for a top-level domain associated to the European Union, something that is like a bit made in EU. When you see made in EU, that you find in many products and fabrics and clothes. And having a .eu extension represents your European online identity, and therefore this is important when you want to present yourself as European, because there is this requirement that you must be resident or citizen of the European Union, or three other countries of the European Economic Area, that are Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland, if you want to register .eu. So if you are a US citizen or a Chinese citizen living in China, based in China, or based in the States, you cannot register a .eu. So when you register a .eu, it means that you are based in the European Union, or you are a citizen of the European Union.
And if you are a UK citizen, then you are probably a tiny bit screwed. Since we already got to it, can you tell like the story here? So what's happened to the EU domains in light of the Brexit?
Yeah, indeed. If you are a UK citizen, what they say in English is tough luck, in the sense that when the entire Brexit started, there was this task force at the European Union level that negotiated the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. One of the points I think was really a micro point was how to manage the .eu top level domain that were assigned to UK residents, and the decision was that UK residents at some point they were given a sort of deadline to find an eligible place in case, for instance, there is a UK resident that has having a sort of French citizenship or whatever. In that case, they can keep the .eu domain name. Otherwise, they have to delete. And as we did on the 1st of January this year, we have suspended all the domain names assigned to UK residents and citizens, which means that in the past, just to give you an idea, we had about 350,000 domain names assigned to UK residents. At present, at the beginning of this year, we moved to the suspended status about 80,000 domain names. So there's been this huge drop in the meanwhile from the announcement of the Brexit. So many of the UK citizens and residents, they have abandoned the .eu because they are no longer eligible, which is a pity because somehow, those people, they had believed, the companies and people, they had believed in .eu, so they were the supporters of the European Union. But there was a decision to stick to the rules. So in this case, the United Kingdom residents or citizens, they are no longer eligible, and therefore they have to, leave the domain name they had registered some time ago.
And do you know what kind of logic led to this, well, pretty harsh decision to just cut all the UK citizens off the domain zone?
It's a good question. I don't know the logic. I know that the best practice in our industry, in the domain name industry, the best practice is to have the registrant, which is the holder of the domain name, keeping at least the domain name until the expiry date. Domain names can be registered from 1 year up to 10 years. That's the registration time frame. And the best practice in our industry, which some other European registers they have applied, is to, let's say, sort of apply the principle of pacta sunt servanda. So, something that was that happened under specific rules, it will stay unless there are changes, and also it will stay in this case until the expiry date of the domain name. In our case, the decision was to stick to the regulation, which says that you must be eligible to keep your domain name throughout the let's say the time you have the domain name. So in this case, at some point, this eligibility, is no longer there, and therefore the UK residents or citizen, they have to cancel, delete, or update their domain name, but they couldn't keep it. So that was, let's say, the logic, a strict interpretation of the one of the two regulations that are at the basis of the .eu level domain.
Right. Okay, so back to the .eu TLD, and can you also sort of give me some context? How big is this top level domain? So how many domains are there? How many registered? How many active? Let's say, and how does it compare to other national domain zones in Europe?
So we have currently 3.7 million domain names registered under .eu. Again, .eu is started in 2006 with .eu in Latin, so EU, and then in 2016 we added the .eu in Cyrillic, and the .eu in Greek was added in 2019. This is to complete the offer in all the different European Union languages, which In our industry, they are called scripts. So we have 3.7 million. Out of the 3.7 million, between 50 and 60% are used, which means that they resolve into websites or have MX records, which means that they're used for email services. It's a sort of average percentage compared to our industry peers. So for most of the European Union top-level domains, there is this percentage between 50 and 60% that are used. In our case, what we have seen, because we run categorization, so we look into the use of the domain names, and the last one we have done was early this year, and what we have found is that there's been an increase in the use for online trade, and that's somehow confirms the trend of using more and more online presence for e-commerce. Which with the pandemic was something that was somehow requested in many countries for many top-level domains. So again, between 50 and 60% are used. There is one important element for .u that we do not sell .u directly. We sell it via a network of what we call registrars, which are internet service providers. And those internet service providers are like our shops, the shops where you can find and you can pick up and select .u.
Right, and then you told me before that the domain is fifth largest in Europe. Is that still correct?
Yeah, so it's the fifth largest in the European Union. So currently, just to give you an idea, at worldwide level, the latest statistics report about 360 million domain names registered under any kind of extension. Out of these 360, about 160 millions are registered under country codes like .fr, .br, .ru, .uk, .it. And in Europe, the top one is Germany with .de, with 17 million domain names, followed by UK. Then there is the Netherlands, France, and EU. Now, UK is no longer. So if you look at the European Union, we are the fourth. If you look at broader, we are the fifth at worldwide level.
Right. Yeah, this is really interesting. And the Netherlands, though, it's a pretty small country, isn't it? How come that there are so many domains, like more NL domains than .eu domains?
So let's say that what we have seen by investigating this environment is that there is a strong correlation between the internet penetration in a country and the number of registration of top-level domain in the country. So what we have seen is that, for instance, if you look at the European Union, there are some countries like Germany and the Netherlands that are the leaders in internet penetration, and they are also the leaders with their national country code in terms of domain names registrations. So the Netherlands and Germany are indeed two countries where there's a lot of registrations of domain names because people, they do understand the importance of having a proper online presence. And also because in both cases, .d and .nl, the registry operator, the managers of those two top-level domains, they have from the start adopted policies and procedures that are very easy, and therefore it's easy and fast to register domain names under those extensions.
Right, and it's, as far as I understand, it's actually a bit less easy to register in a .eu domain because you have to prove that you are a resident of a European Union country, right?
So yeah, indeed. I mean, for the .u, we have this rule that you must be resident in the territory of the European Union, or you must be a citizen of the European Union. In that case, it doesn't matter where you live, or you must be a resident or a citizen of Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. That are three countries of the European Economic Area that are eligible for .u domain names. We have, let's say, quite, let's say, strict regulatory framework, which, for instance, is not there in other European Union countries for other European Union top-level domains. In our case, we have 2 regulations and quite many, really many amendments to those regulations, and so the entire .eu framework is based on those regulations, which does not mean that is more difficult, but certainly that those who are registering the .eu are subject to a bit more stringent rules than under other top-level domains.
Right. And if you look at your experience at .it registry manager and compare it to what's going on with the .eu, so what are the differences, the fundamental differences for you between national and European levels?
So my experience at the .it was between 1999 and 2004, and at that time to register a .it you had to send a fax. That was really the let's say something that at present when somebody is talking about fax, probably if you talk about fax to young generation, they don't even know what is a fax. But at that time to register a .it you had to send a fax, and then this fax, let's say the data on the fax, they had to match an electronic form that the registry was receiving from the registrar. So it was really it was an experience. It was, again, more than 15 years ago. The .u started immediately with everything automated. And the main difference between a registry like .it, but also .fr or .nl, is that the .u top-level domain caters for a much broader market. So let's say that 90% of the registrations for .it from .fr for .nl, they come from the country. So there are people or companies based in that country. In our case, we do currently cater for 30 countries. And we have a good distribution of registrations. Of course, we have some countries like, again, Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, France, Italy, where the .u sells better. But let's say that we cover 30 countries. And so the distribution is much broader. As much broader is also the network of the registrars, the retailers, the resellers of the .u top-level domain. Again, in a local TLD like .it or .fr, most of the registrars are local registrars. In our case, we have registrars from all around the world, and certainly we have registrars from each European Union country. So I think that the international aspect is from a customer's perspective, it is what it makes the difference between the .u and also the local TLD.
And in terms of regulation and the way that you are overseen, so it's not national regulatory agencies in this case. Is it the European Commission that oversees the domain zone?
So for .u, we have this regulatory framework coming from the European Commission and the European Parliament. At the national level, so like .it or .fr, they do also have national agencies that they are looking after the regulation of the top-level domain. Again, in our case, we are talking about European Union regulations. So whenever something has to be amended, you have to go through the procedure of amending it via the European Commission, the Parliament, the Council. So it may take a bit longer. And that's why a couple of years ago, the European Commission started the process to simplify our regulatory framework and also to make easier in case there is a need of amendments. And this is a process that is still ongoing because the new .u regulation will enter into force in October 2022, so in 1 year time. And from that moment, certain, let's say, changes in the overall framework will be eventually easy to make.
And you also mentioned that the domain names sell better in certain countries, and since and I never really thought about it. So you are actually a business; you are selling domain names. So is the .eu TLD actually profitable?
So by regulation, URID, the registry manager, is a not-for-profit organization. So we are a not-for-profit and we work at cost. And we work at cost with a service concession contract with the European Commission. and which means that whatever we do not invest in the service that we deliver to our customers, this goes back to the European Union budget. We do not receive funds from the European Union because we are self-sustained with the fee that we apply on the .eu top-level domain. At the same time, it is a profitable business because again, we try to make the .eu appealing as much as possible. However, contrary to many industry peers, again, by regulation and by contract, we do focus only on the .eu. So we cannot sell other products. So we cannot, let's say, do anything else than managing the .eu, which is something good for the .eu itself because we are fully focused on the .eu as a top-level domain, while some of the industry peers at some point they have switched to also support other extensions at regional level. In our case, no. In our case, it's just the .eu and the .eu, of course, in Cyrillic and in Greek. So it is, let's say, profitable in the sense that every year we have, we have to sustain some cost, and at the end of the year, whatever we do not again invest gets into a so-called surplus that is returned back to the European Union budget.
And how big is your team at Eurid? How many people are working there?
Currently, we are around 50 people, and we have the headquarters is near Brussels, and we have what we call regional presence in three countries that are Sweden, Italy, and the Czech Republic. And the reason why we have this regional presence is because at the very beginning, one of the requirements for the .eu registry was to be close to the community that we were going to serve. And to be close to the community, we thought it was a good idea to have some regional presence. And the regional presence, for instance, the regional presence in Prague looks after all the countries located in the eastern part of the European Union. So, like Romania, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, they're all, let's say, all the customers are looked after by the office we have in Prague.
This is really interesting. So, Eurid, so you are basically part of this internet backbone in Europe, but also part of this internet infrastructure in general worldwide. So, what do you see as the challenges that are in front of you as an organization, but also in front of the internet as a whole?
I think that one of the biggest challenges at present, one of the biggest challenges that our community is facing is to ensure the security and stability of the top-level domain environment, which is not easy because as many other companies in the world, we are subject to different kind of attacks. And it's a great responsibility because, sometimes people tend to ignore, or at least they don't think that when they are on Google, when they are on Facebook, there is always a domain name behind behind this, let's say, incredible tool they're using. So when they're using google.com or google.eu or google.it or google.nl, there is a domain name that is at basis of that. Whenever they're posting something on facebook.com, facebook.com is a domain name. And so let's say that one of the main duties and responsibilities of our industry is to make sure that our infrastructure is sufficiently redundant and robust. And so the main challenge at present is to make sure that if there are attacks of any kind, the technical infrastructure stays there. So whoever, for instance, digit on a keyboard europa.eu, which is in our case the main domain name, or at least one of the most important domain names that there are under the .eu zone, europa.eu can resolve, and therefore people are directed to the correct website. And the same for VeriSign, that is the registry manager of .com. They have whenever somebody digit google.com or digit facebook.com or Instagram or whatever, in that case, they have the responsibility to make sure that those domain names resolves into the website, and there is no, nothing jeopardizes this resolution. And again, there are different kind of attacks that we are subjects. There are different ways of mitigating those attacks, to manage those attacks. So that is probably the biggest challenge.
Right. And so Europa.eu is the largest, most important domain that you've got in the zone. Does it have any sort of special status? Does it have any special protection in a way?
Well, it's let's say all the .eu domain name are equally important to us. Certainly, Europa.eu is particularly important because it's a source of information for all European Union citizens. And so we pay a lot of attention to the management of Europa.eu. We have a contact point at the European Commission for Europa.eu. We are in regular touch with the European Commission whenever they have to make technical changes on Europa.eu. So certainly, it as one of the largest domain names in terms of the fact that it resolves in one of the biggest website under .eu, we make sure that there is a good cooperation between the different parties so that the domain name and the website they continue to function well.
Right. And we are almost at half an hour, and I wanted to keep it at that. So just one more question that I wanted to hear your opinion on is, we have seen a whole bunch of new regulations coming from the European Commission around the internet. So we have the Copyright Directive, we have DSA and DMA and so on. Does it mean anything to you as a TLD registry manager? And what's your general stance on all these regulations? Maybe even over-regulation of the internet?
Well, we are a registry that is somehow facilitated because we started under some regulation. So we are used to let's say, manage the top-level domain under regulatory framework. At the same time, I think it's important to, let's say, always look at the innovation, to promote and support innovation without exaggerating in regulation. And that's because what we have seen recently is that there are many small players that they may soon leave the market or have left the market because certain regulations, like the most famous one of the past is the GDPR, the privacy regulation, they were just too much for them to comply with. And so they decided to sell the business to big players. So I think that there should be always, whenever there is a new regulation, there should be possibly a sort of cost-benefit assessment of the regulation, which the European Commission regularly does. But again, what we have seen is that there are more and more small players leaving the market in our industry, I mean.
Right. Yeah, this is a very fair point. Now, Giovanni, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this insight into how the top-level domain.eu works. Thanks a lot for taking the time and joining today.
Thank you so much, Andre. Thank you so much for the interview. Bye-bye.
And this is it for our today's episode. Huge thanks to Giovanni Seppia for joining this show, and big thanks to you out there for listening. If you like our show, follow us today wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if that place has a possibility to rate and review the show, please do that as well. Our audio engineering is done by SoundPulse, that is sound-pulse.com. Your questions, suggestions, and opinions are always very welcome. Send them by email to podcast@tech.eu. This was TechEU Podcast. I'm Andrew Degler, and I will talk to you again very soon. For now, take care and enjoy your week. Bye-bye.